This is the Loudest Crow. I am Jonathan Louderback.
I'm Justin Kroh, and tonight we're here to caw through the noise.
We are.
We are.
Yeah, sorry for doing that real slow. I was very much trying to make sure I got it right. I was being very careful.
Being very careful, slow and steady.
It's like going
wins the
going
race.
up or down the stairs when everyone was asleep.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because speaking of like going slow and stuff, we were rock climbing today, and while we were doing these routes and stuff, our friend AJ was with us, and he was going up this one route really slowly, and he was just like, "Ugh," like you could almost hear his like muscles like tensing up. He was going so slow, and he looked so exhausted. He was just shaking and stuff. And then he finally got to the top of the route, and he came down, and he was like, "Oh, that took so much out of me, but I feel so accomplished because I made it." And then he was like, "I want to see you do it, Justin." And so since I've been climbing longer, so I strapped myself in and shot up the thing in like 20 seconds. And he was like, "What? Dude, you just flew up that." And at first I was like, "Oh, yes, thank you. I know, I'm very impressive." But then I thought about it, and going slow is sometimes more impressive than going fast.
Oh, 100%. Like,
Yeah.
because in the circumstance of rock climbing, I'd say the isometric exercise of holding yourself still. Like, there's, like, some of the most exhausted I've ever been, like, arm-wise, whenever you arm wrestle somebody who's, like, the same strength as you.
Yeah.
Not, like, stronger than you where you instantly lose, or weaker than you where you instantly win, but just strong enough where you're sat there, keeping that arm tensed that entire time. And it's the same for that, right?
Yeah, no, it's exhausting. And like with bouldering, I feel like it's so much easier to like just boulder for a long time because you have those short bursts of energy, constantly with the short routes, and it's more about the technical moves.
It's the technical moves. And
Yeah.
if you don't know the technical moves, then you're going to take longer. And bouldering, bouldering, taking longer while bouldering is way more exhausting than
Yeah.
taking a long time on the endurance routes.
That's fair. Yeah, just because you're relying on your arms so much more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because it's like on the other routes, you can find places usually that you can get fairly okay balance to stand on, and take a little bit of a breather. But if you're hanging from something, you can't just be like, okay, 1 second,
Sure is.
let me
sure
catch
is-
my
sure is
breath.
cool.
You know, just clenching for dear life.
And
I saw an interview real quick. I really want to
go
insert
ahead.
this real quick with
Yeah.
like I'm sure you've heard about him. I forget his name, but he's that guy that does all like the unassisted, super
free
big climbs.
solos.
The
Yeah,
free,
yeah,
he's
that
like the
guy.
free solo guy.
yeah.
Like I was watching an interview. He did this one. He's like, yeah. So everyone's like, oh, if you fall off, you die. Well, you're probably not gonna die because there are certain sections where it's like you're climbing and there's like a 50 feet down. There's a ledge that will probably catch you. So like you probably wouldn't die. You just be broken. And the interview stared at him like. The absolute difference in perceptions of life and death there.
Man, people like that, they scare me. They scare
It's
me
like
so
Elijah,
much.
right?
That is like Elijah. I think I think over the summer, Elijah will slowly like become that free solo guy.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
he is going into the military before too long. He's going to go to the National Guard.
Really? So he's going through with that. I've heard him kind of talking about
I've
that.
heard it. I'm not like obviously he hasn't signed the paper yet, so it's like not we don't know. But I think the idea he has is he wants to take next semester off and go in. But the reason I bring it up, it's like it's odd, but I feel like being a daredevil is kind of hard to do in the army, in a way. And now there are certain pathways that it's a great way to be a daredevil. Like if you you get to the end of being a member of the special forces, or there's a certain MOSs that are pretty fucking scary, like landmine disarm or whatever, something like that. But I think most of the professions in the army, it's like chefs, mechanics,
Programmers.
and it's one of those jobs where you do what you're told. You don't not.
Yeah.
You do what you're told.
You don't do the whole like guns blazing like Rambo.
Yeah, I
just
mean,
jumping
no, there are
into it.
people who do that.
There are, but they're very far and few between.
Because talking about military science and the evolution of the armed forces, right? It's like something I think is super fascinating is that you can bring mathematical principles into the evolution of the military, right? It used to be that by the basis of how easy it was to produce weapons and armor and to feed people, that you couldn't field more than, like, in really early history, like a 10,000 man army was a massive army. And in that circumstance, almost every one of those 10,000, it's like, I think it's called a tooth to tail ratio. It's like how many fighting soldiers are there for every logistical soldiers. And basically every soldier was a logistical soldier and a fighting soldier. So like every one of those 10,000, maybe 9,500 would fight. Nowadays in the U.S. Army, I want to say the ratio is like there's one fighting soldier for like every 4 or 5 logistical soldiers, right? Like truck drivers, airplane pilots, chefs, just those types of people. The vast majority of the armed forces is that.
And that makes sense, because it makes sense, like, when you have such a large, army now, such a large force, it's like the battle isn't won, by, just having like lots of strong fighters. The battle is won by having a strong support, because, like if you have like armies of millions of people, like a difference between 51% of your soldiers surviving and 52% of your soldiers
that's
surviving.
What I was talking about. It's massive.
It's thousands of people.
And the reason I brought the statistics earlier is because you're kind of going down the same pipeline that I started thinking out just a while ago. In World War II, it wasn't a matter of having the best soldiers or having the most disciplined soldiers, because that's always going to be the very upper echelon, like upper percentile of your army. It's having the average of your armed forces being the best supplied, most motivated. You don't want to worry about the very worst. You don't want to worry about the very best. They have their purposes. They have the ways of dealing with that. But you want to worry about that average, because you're dealing in terms of millions of men.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because like bell curve wise, it's like you want to make sure your bell curve is like a very, very as flat as possible.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to like, oh yes, you have some really good soldiers here, but most of them are just like on this average where it's not 300 anymore. It's not the days of Greece where you can have that sort of stuff happen. Like whenever you're fighting a war across a 200-mile front line that spans entire continents, like it did in World War II, it doesn't matter if you have 300 really good men. They have purposes. They still have a use in war, of course. But you just want your average Joe Smo to have the best possible chance of winning as you can. The best possible chance of winning.
Especially whenever it's like a gun. A person who has only fired a gun twice has a fairly equal chance of killing you as a guy who's trained with a gun their entire life. Obviously, there's plenty of leeway. Like, that's not an entirely true statement. But in the context of the gun can still kill you just as easy. Like, with a sword, like, people think, oh, you just cut with it.
No.
No, like, there's so much mechanics, there's so much skill that goes into that. Even the more simple weapons like a spear, there's still so much more that goes into it. A gun is just like, you point, you shoot.
Yeah. And
it's still obviously, I'm very vastly simplifying it here. There's a lot that goes into it, and there's a lot of skill that goes into being a soldier in the modern day. But the difference and the level of
skill required to actually kill someone.
The skill floor. Yeah.
So it is one of those things where it's just a lot easier to jump in there and be like, well, it doesn't matter if I kill, people like twice as often as this other Joe Schmo. There are 10 other Joe Schmoes, so they're going to kill a lot more people. Whereas with like wielding swords, it's like if you're 10 times better at killing people, well, actually, if you know how to use a sword, you're probably like 1,000 times better at killing people.
Very much so. Yeah, it's. I think, and obviously I don't have any experience, or if you don't know that, but like I think people really underestimate how hard it like is to kill somebody, not just on a skill level, but on a psychological and physical level. Like just living things don't die easy usually.
I mean, yeah, if they did, we wouldn't be here.
and other types of biomass wouldn't be here either. Everything has those defense mechanisms. It's like I remember I watched this video. It was about a medieval duel of honor, because it used to be that you could have in certain countries you could have something called a trial by combat. Like it was like displayed in Game of Thrones, but it's a real thing. Like people of class, of status, could demand that their trial be given into the hands of God, and they could appoint a champion or fight themselves to decide who was right. And I watched this one duel. I forget who it was between, but it was these two armored knights. And if you know anything about plate armor, that shit's impenetrable. So they started off on horseback. Both got knocked off their horses. Then took out their swords, and their swords weren't doing anything. So they boiled down to grappling, and it turned into a heavy, exhausted grappling match where one guy took out a dagger, slipped it, and no, it wasn't. Sorry, it was the groin. Slipped it into the groin.
Oh yikes!
But it took 2 hours. The duel did for that to that conclusion.
That'd be so and like you said, like the psychological element of like not just the physical time of like spending 2 hours trying to fight someone to the death, but the psychological torment that you're going through while you're doing that. Like, if you've got a gun, boom.
Yeah, it's over.
You don't have time to
later.
think about your actions. Yeah. Exactly, you deal with it later.
It's like whenever you're fighting somebody to death hand to hand, you're dealing with that shit then.
Yeah.
You know? And after the adrenaline fades, because it fades very quick, you know, like one of the biggest things, battles were not lost whenever you killed everyone. Battles were lost whenever the other guy decided to run. And, you know, you look at it, you're like, oh, why did these guys run? They're cowards. It's not because they're cowards. It's because they're experiencing, like, literally, like, okay, one of my favorite examples. I forget what specific battle it was. I think it was in Napoleon's Russian campaign. Like the infamous failed campaign that he took into Russia. The one that led to the downfall of his empire. And there's this one battle where he pushed the Russians to a river. And he kept pushing his forces forward. The river was frozen, right? And they kept pushing his forces forward, and the Russians were trying to hold, but they kept being pushed back and back and back. And they broke. And the reason this term broke is they broke mentally. They ran across the river, it broke, and I think like 5,000 people drowned or something like that in the river. If not more. Right? Faced with certain death in front and certain death in behind, they chose certain death behind, essentially, because they weren't all there at that point. So it's just fascinating how, and something else I want to bring up because I think it's ridiculous. It's like this notion that women can't fight still. You know, like there's a big cultural movement in like the right in American politics that I disagree with, where it's like, oh, they're wokeifying the military. You may have seen some of those commercials where it's like, oh, I have 2 moms. It's like whatever. It's like the truth of the matter is, it's like all these guys are like, oh, look at Russia's commercials where they got like badasses who are jumping from airplanes. It's like you don't need the badasses. You need the person who knows how to code a missile defense system. Right?
I see where we're getting at now. Yeah.
It's like, it's not a matter of boots on the ground. Like, you do need those people. You always will need those people. But like you said earlier, like, modern war is going to be less and less fought by boots on the ground, trenches in the ground, because that's unpopular. People want to avoid it. It's terrifying. It's miserable. It's going to be more and more fought and by proxy, if possible. Either in other countries, by the powers that be, like in Ukraine, or by unmanned craft, like drones or the terrifying robot dogs. I'm not sure if you've seen those at all.
I think I have, in just like a couple short clips online, yeah. Robot dogs, dude.
It's sci-fi, man.
It's sci-fi but real. And that's just kind of the thing about science. I think, or not science, but like just progression in general, I think is really neat, especially the last 200 years. Just like stuff that would be considered magic or fiction just a while ago is now just like every day.
And even then, but like the stuff they thought we would do, there are some things they were right, but in certain directions that they were so thoroughly wrong.
Yeah, it's like who would imagine we'd just be carrying around lots of glowing rectangles instead of flying around on like jetpacks and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I think is very interesting. It's like how unpredictable the future is, just in general. Like one thing that I think is interesting that like a lot of people got wrong when they're envisioning the future is futuristic cities, futuristic architecture. They're envisioning us living in these very modern looking, well, not modern, but like postmodern sort of like futuristic looking buildings and architecture and stuff. And that just doesn't make sense simply because we're not going to tear down all of our old buildings just so we can have fancy looking new ones. That just doesn't make sense economically.
But it depends on the circumstance, right? One of the most modern cities in the world is Tokyo in Japan. You know why?
Why?
The firebombing that the Americans did during World War II. There are circumstances where the cities were torn down.
Well,
right?
Yeah, but what I'm getting at is
I do get what you're saying.
Yeah.
And despite those circumstances, if anything, what I'm saying proves your point. Because the city literally had to be burned down for them to build the modern city that they did.
And so like new stuff will pop up here and there, but it's not this homogenous. It's not this homogenous, super futuristic, new, fresh kind of thing that a lot of people back in the day were envisioning. Simply because it's just like we're not going to tear out everything just to put new stuff into it. We're going to try and expand on the stuff that we already have. Like think cell phones. It's like the natural progression of those was like, well, first we had the telephone, really cool. Let's make that better. Let's make that better. And then like you had the iPhone, which is revolutionary, with the touchscreen technology, and now like we all have that. It's just very interesting to see how it's like we don't really know what our needs will be or what our wants will be as a society until like we just make new stuff and see what direction that takes us in.
I have a few points I want to make, but two counterpoints to what you said, and not out of a place of like combativeness, but just like I think they're interesting. The I would almost call it the revolution of the car in the United States totally changed the way the American city looked. You know what I did? Like,
that is true. It
from
did.
like the ground up.
Because you had to have parking lots, parking garages, and streets going everywhere.
And streets used to be something you could walk. Like so Broadway Avenue, New York.
Used to be able to walk down that.
You just walked on that
like
road.
The occasional carriage might go by or something.
Yeah, you walked. But nowadays, you don't fucking walk on the actual street itself.
This is true.
Another really interesting phenomenon that happened, I'm not sure, it's kind of not really talked about, but it's probably one of the most impactful, right up there with the agrarian revolution in terms of quality of life for the human race. The sanitation revolution.
Yes. With like sewer systems,
plumbing, clean water. It's just one of the most seemingly boring but most important, awesome things. Also, something that's really funny. Do you know Game of Thrones at all?
No.
So Jon Snow is like one of the main characters in that.
I at least heard the name Jon Snow.
Jon Snow is the name of a doctor who discovered that cholera. He's one of the founders of germ theory, because he discovered that cholera was being transmitted via dirty water. Like people were dumping their sewage
into the streets and
stuff. It'd get into the drinking water, and obviously that gives you cholera. And he would often go to the local universities and say, "Hey, look, I found out this is what's happening." They'd be like, "You know nothing, Jon Snow."
You know nothing, Jon Snow.
Which is funny. It's very funny.
Speaking of plumbing, I have to talk about this. Do you know where I'm?
I honestly don't, but like it's got to be unfortunate.
Well, the segue, speaking of plumbing, it's not unfortunate at all. In fact, it's very fortunate.
Oh, Mario!
Yeah, the Super Mario Bros. Movie. So that came out. It released in theaters Wednesday. Saw it on Wednesday with a bunch of my friends. So, is it a great movie? No. Is it a great movie? Yes. So, and what I'm getting at is like I compare it to like Oreos. Okay, so if you eat a ton of Oreos, like you're not going to get nutritional value from that, but you just want to keep eating them because they're very enjoyable. They're nice to consume. It makes you feel good, but it's not substantive, and that's what the Mario movie is. It's a treat. It's not something you go to and you're like, I want to savor this. I want to taste all the layers of this.
It's just fun.
It is fun. It is the most fun I've had going to a movie in a long time. It rivals my experience with Everything Everywhere All at Once. Have you seen that?
I've not, no.
Okay. I went to that and saw it in theaters on a date, and that was a really fun theater experience. But honestly, I think the Mario movie tops it because it made me feel like a kid again. And it kind of got me thinking, like, a lot of us, especially at this age, the pressure to adult comes on. It's like, I gotta take things more seriously now. Of course, I can have fun, but I need to start changing my definition of fun. And I need to have philosophical discussion with my friends. And I need to take care of my physical health by rock climbing. And I need to do this and I need to do that. But every now and then, you gotta treat yourself. Not just in the sense of, like, your health, but also in the sense of, like, your psyche. Give yourself something fun where you shut your brain off and you enjoy it. And, like, because like, a lot of people have been saying since the movie came out, like, oh, it's for kids. And so some people use that to brush aside criticism. Other people say that to, explain just like why they liked it and or why they enjoyed seeing it with their kids. It's like, oh, I wouldn't see it on my own, but I enjoyed bringing my kids to it because they had fun with it. And I'm like, I don't like that approach because I get what they mean. Like, oh yeah, it's aimed at kids, and I would agree. Like a lot of like the humor in the movie and like how colorful it is, it's something that's more appealing to kids just because they have shorter attention spans. The movie also goes at a breakneck pace, so it kind of feeds into that as well. But I feel like things that are for kids, what that really just means at the end of the day is it is an Oreo. It is not substantive, but you can still have a lot of fun with it. Because I wouldn't say Oreos are for kids, but kids go out of their way to consume Oreos more than adults do. Right? And I think there's just so much value in having those little things in your life that just fill you with joy. They make you feel like a kid again. But really, that's just another way of saying is they make you... They relieve the pressure to take everything so seriously. And I think that's just something that we all need at some point.
I think there's a balance to strike. And I think it's interesting because I've had I've been to the movies twice. I went twice in one day. Yesterday.
Wow.
Not necessarily because it was like pre-planned. I really wanted to do it, but just because I wanted two movies I wanted to see. It was like the one day I could like really theoretically see both of them. I went to go see it with my grandmother and my little sister and my cousin. We all went together. We went to see D&D, and I saw John Wick 4, which is very contradictory to that. Like the two big movies right now, that like the Mario movie, and John Wick. It's like so different. And I think in a major way, adults trick themselves into thinking that they are more sophisticated, more grown up by consuming things like John Wick. But in reality, like really upon like looking at the movie, it's just like gory action fest McShoot guy. Like there is a plot there, but it's not the point. Really, I think the plot services to facilitate the action scenes, and the action scenes are awesome and they're really fun to watch. But it's not like I'm sitting there like, And I don't think many of the other adults there are sitting there doing the same thing. And even though they would not disparage John Wick for being lacking substance, they would the Mario movie. Because I do think you're right. I think that there's a certain quality of adulthood where it's like, it's not even just that you can't be a kid, but you have to like disparage people who do.
Yeah.
But I think there's a balance to strike. Because I think that like, I genuinely do think it is a problem. Maybe not a problem, but certainly a phenomenon that I'm not sure if, like, that I think will develop and we'll have to see what it does. Is that people in our generation in particular aren't liking the adulting thing. Like, the word adulting has come to prominence. And I have a little bit of contradictory view because I don't think adulting is inherently negative. I think adulting is merely the coming into the world as it is. And that allows you to experience the world as it is in all of its beautiful aspects more deeply than you could as a child, and more independently.
Yes.
But it also means you experience the negative parts more deeply than you did as a child.
No, I fully agree. And I think that actually ties into something I've been thinking about lately, which is just like our generation is very nostalgia heavy.
Oh my gosh,
like
yes.
we're looking back at things from like 10 years ago, sometimes
5 years
even
ago.
5.
Like
yeah,
5
sometimes
years
5
ago.
years ago. And it's just like, oh, I'm so nostalgic for that. I wish I could go back to that time. And I'm like, okay, I get it.
Dude, you're 18.
But exactly, it's like, just chill out here. It's like, maybe reminisce on, like, those days when you're 80 or something. But, like, I get the value of nostalgia. But I feel like a part of that is just you're growing up and you're starting to do that process of seeing, like, the world for what it is. Both its beautiful aspects and for its not so beautiful aspects. And you're appreciating, you're confronting both of those on a deeper level than you could before. But I feel like, we have this tendency to just be like, well, yeah, the beautiful stuff is cool too, but I'm just going to look at the bad, right? Because it does kind of demand more of your attention because you feel like you have to defend yourself.
I think it depends a little bit on the circumstance. I think that there's a few phenomena that are happening. First and foremost, social media and internet culture has caused us to be constantly confronted by negative things that we have. I've watched a very fascinating video about this very topic, but constantly confronted by negative things in the world that we have no capability of being able to impact. It's like, I keep up with the war in Ukraine because I'm fascinated by it. Do I have literally any impact besides maybe my vote on, like, national politics? On, like, what I can actually do about that?
Yeah, no.
Something the video brought to attention, we live in an age where 90% of what you consume will not change something that you plan to do today. Right? It's not.
That's a good point.
It's you consume it, you say, I have an opinion on that now, and then you don't have it affect anything about you. I think what this does is it creates this really negative outlook because there is so much negative to focus on in the world, and it sells better than positive news. And I think that ties in with this. It's really interesting because it's actually a historical phenomenon I think is happening. It's like people are anachronistic. There's the word. About their past. They view they view the past as though their current selves. They view the past as though it was experienced by who they are right now and not who they were then.
That's exactly the right? thing that's causing all this nostalgia stuff. Because 5 years ago, I didn't think about wars. I didn't think about international politics and like imposing tariffs on people. I didn't think about terrorism. I didn't think about any of that. This because I couldn't really understand it, and I didn't need to understand it to get through with my day-to-day life. And arguably now I still don't necessarily need all of that. Because while I am old enough to vote and I try to vote on things I care about, like, I'm not going out there, on the front lines in Ukraine.
And even if like you could, even to a citizen of Ukraine, no, I guess a citizen of Ukraine should probably be well informed about the war, but a citizen of Ukraine doesn't need to be informed about the stuff that's going on in Turkey with the earthquakes. Yeah. Like, they don't need to be. Like, maybe you could argue there's a responsibility, but I think that more than anything, like, it's not that you shouldn't know about these things, but it's like the fact that the people's consumption of news about these things is constant. That's the issue. It's like, it used to be that you sat down for 30 minutes every day, you watched the news, you talked about it before bed, you went to bed. Right? Maybe you talked about it the next day. But you were only able to consume the news, maybe in the newspaper in the morning, but 30 minutes a day from that TV broadcast.
Now it's just a constant feed.
Constant feed. And it's not even just on TV anymore. It's a constant feed straight to your phone. You get push notifications.
Yes. Yeah.
They're like, hey, did you know that this is happening? The stock market's collapsing. Go to your bank, pull out all your money.
Yeah. Well, to build on what you said earlier about, like, making the mistake of looking at your past self and assuming you viewed the world the same way back then. It goes directly into that point of, at that point, you couldn't appreciate the simplicity of your life back then because you didn't understand that your life was so simple. You didn't understand that, there's so much more out there. Not necessarily more bad stuff out there, but there's more out there. And as you grow up, it's like with greater power comes greater responsibility. It's like you have the capacity to understand more, to look outside of yourself more, see what's going on out in the world. And with that comes a responsibility to, now you don't just kind of have this very simplistic worldview. You have to kind of focus your energy on the positive things that you can. And you have to actually, you have to savor your meal. You have to savor the positive things that come your way because you are now endowed with the capacity to do that. But you're also empowered with the capacity to savor the bad things and to fester over them. So it's like, to go back to that meal analogy, it's like I could have a great meal right in front of me, and I could taste it, right?
Like, oh, the service is terrible. The people over there suck.
Yeah, I could do that. I could do that. Because when you're a kid, you don't care about that. You're just like you're sitting there slapping the table with your hand.
It's not even that you don't care. It's like, I think that the issue is not that kids didn't have bad times. It's that they do. It's that they had simpler times.
They had simpler times.
Is the key, and they also had less input on their surrounding actions. And also, it wasn't simpler because you had any less complex emotions or thoughts about the situation. It's that your ability to affect those things was so little that it boiled down to a simple.
Well, I would also argue that your ability to understand them is more simple simply because you have a simpler perspective. You haven't you don't have that ability to pick up on nuance that comes with
the understanding. Yes, the emotions, no. The emotions are just as complex in that time. It's just that you don't have the ability to decipher them or to pick them apart.
Okay, I can agree with that. Yeah.
And the only reason I want to make that distinction clear is because I think people look at kids because I think a mistake that always frustrated me that my parents made, especially my stepdad specifically, he's like, man, high school's the best time of your life. Sometimes high school does not feel like the best time of your life because it doesn't have to be. It isn't necessarily. But, there's this person looking back at you, it's like, man, your life's so easy. I wish I could just do what you do. And you're like, I still have shitty times too. Like a kid can still have really shitty times. Yeah. That's not the issue. The issue is that people, I think, because like, what do people mean when they say they hate adulting? They hate having efficacy. They hate having to make decisions.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
No, that's just right on the nose. They hate, having responsibility
that they can be wrong with.
That they can be wrong with. Yeah. Because when there's more on the line, that can, I think, inherently just be more stressful. But it can also be more beautiful because it's like, well, I have more agency now, and while yes, that increases the risk of me, screwing my life up, also increases my ability to, take myself somewhere.
I think
to do things and to be.
I think
somewhere.
the crux of it is agency equals uncertainty, because if you are your own agent in your life, if you have primary control, then you cannot outsource blame for an event. Whenever you can outsource blame for an event, it's very easy to go day to day. because you have to. There's no other solution. There's no other question. Like, if your parents decide to move, you just gotta fucking move.
You would
Right?
go.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas, if, say, you're an adult contemplating a big move, it's like, maybe I hate it, maybe I don't. And you have to think about those because you have to be the one that thinks in advance.
Yeah.
I think that people conflate the lack of decision-making with happiness, which is dangerous.
It's very dangerous.
And, because that's why, because, like, whenever people say they hate adulting, they're saying they hate doing their taxes. They're saying they hate driving, or any number of things that are of that vein. And do I agree? Hell yeah. I hate doing both those things sometimes. But driving also has allowed me agency to deliver myself to places that I want to be. And you're right whenever you say that it's like the point of view, the stance that you take.
It's so funny you say like this driving example specifically, because on my way here tonight, I was getting out of my car and I was like, it's really cool. I wanted to go rock climbing with some friends, so I just drove there, did that, then drove and had a nice dinner with my friends without any input from my parents, and then I drove them home and then went to my house, picked up some stuff, and now I'm going to my friend's house.
Do you ever have one of those moments where you kind of look around and you're like, is no one going to tell me no?
I do.
You know,
all the time. And, especially being in college now. Well, like I still live with my parents, so it's not like quite all the way there. But like
your parents strike me as the type that mostly leave you alone.
They do, but they weren't for the longest time. Up until I was in high school, they were very overprotective. But as soon as I got there, it all kind of fell away because they realized he needs to kind of figure out that he's got to be responsible.
He's like almost an adult.
Yeah,
you know.
No, so I definitely agree with that. Adulting is really just the capacity to make wrong decisions that are more impactful. But that's also the capacity to make right decisions that are more impactful.
I think people too, and it's not the same for everybody, unfortunately. Some people don't have a support structure where if they make a mistake, they'll get pulled out. But if you do, I think it's important to remember that even if you are an adult, even if the decisions you make will have greater consequences, it's not going to be impossible to pull yourself out. Or to make a life that you can enjoy living, or at least be content in. Like, something I think is really interesting is, I think our generation is not having kids, or at least as nearly as much. We're having less and less kids. Why is that? I watched a funny video today. It's because our parents were like, you know how hard it is to raise you, how expensive it is to raise you? And it's true. And I think a lot of people, they make decisions, they get themselves stuck into circumstances that they can't necessarily easily remove themselves from, and they allow that feeling of stuck to ruin their ability to enjoy those circumstances. Whereas the important thing to do is, no matter where you aren't stuck, because you are still an agent for change. Right? You can still be better, do better, have a better life. I think it's like people get so stuck into the thought that they can make bad decisions that they forget that even if they do, that's not like the end of the road.
Yeah. There will always be more decisions to be made. And that is another thing that's like so freeing though, like, because even without a support system, a bad decision will seldom be your last decision, right?
Seldom. Sometimes it will be, but you're right. Very, very most often, you'll have an opportunity to make a better one.
And I always find that encouraging because it's just like, yeah, I'm gonna mess up. I'm gonna be a little silly. I'm gonna be a little stupid, but that's just life, right? And that's why I liked like the Mario movie so much, is it was a reminder to me that's like, sometimes things are just gonna be a little silly, gonna be a little stupid, but there's a kind of childlike joy to be had. And I think it's just humbling though to like the situation with this girl I asked out about a month ago. It's like I've been looking at myself as I've gone through a situation. I'm like, was that a good decision? Was this a good way of thinking about it? Am I wrong for feeling this way? Am I right for feeling this way? Am I handling it well? And I keep thinking about that. And at the same time, I have this notion that, Justin, you're so worried about this, but, by the time you come out of it, it won't really matter what you did as much as you think it will. Because obviously, like, my decisions have impact and weight to them, but they're not going to put me in a place where I'll never love again, right? That's not how it works. But oftentimes, just encountering these responsibilities for the first time makes it feel like your first wrong decision is going to be, like, something that ruins your life. And that's just not the case. It'll probably hurt you a little bit. Like when I got into my car accident a couple years ago, that the decision to not check my blind spot until it was too late was a pretty bad decision.
But it's not like you couldn't drive again.
It's not like I couldn't drive again. And so I kind of built myself back up and, And I was just talking about how cool I think it is that I'm able to drive. And so I think a lot of us get, well, I like what Elijah calls it. He calls it analysis paralysis. We get to this state where we're just like, we worry so much about making a bad decision that we make no decision. And honestly, that's the worst decision, is the one that doesn't exist.
One of my favorite phrases, and it's not necessarily perfectly applicable here, but I think it has some value, is that you don't know the captain till he has faced a storm. And the notion is that a captain or any professional or anybody might be perfectly fine in everyday circumstances, but you don't truly figure out the substance of their character until there's a crisis.
I agree.
And I think that whenever it's like thinking is in its own way a procrastination of making the decision. Because at some point, it's like there's a trait that's really prized in military leaders of being able to make a quick decision. And because sometimes, whenever, especially you are dealing in everyday life or just in life with other human beings, being able to make a decision first sometimes wins the day for you.
Yeah.
A good example is a guy who may like a girl, or a girl might like a guy, but they wait too long, and then somebody else asks them out. In that circumstance, maybe we're asking them out was the wrong call, but if you had never done it, then you never would have known.
Well, and that's exactly why I asked this one girl out, because I was like, I've kind of reached this point where I've already thought about it from about every angle I can without just doing it. Like, so there's no point. There's no point in it. We're pretty good friends, and I want to see if we can be more than that, because for one reason or another, I'm interested. And so I'm like, hey, do you want to do that? And then she was like, yes. And then she was like, well, I don't know, I'm not so sure. Give me some time to think about it. And I was like, okay. And since then, I've been kind of patient, and I'm expecting it to eventually be a no. Unfortunately, it definitely seems like the direction like it would go in, but it doesn't matter because my agency in this situation has been removed. I've done all I have to do, so I don't have to stress about the situation.
The same way a kid might feel whenever a parent's making a call for him, right?
Kind of like that, yeah. And it can oftentimes be frustrating to not be able to have that impact that you want, especially when you get older and you feel as though you should have more impact. But I think that's another thing that kind of comes with age, is learning what the boundaries of your agency actually are.
And the beauty and understanding that even though it may feel as though every decision you make might end the world, in fact, your decisions sometimes mean distressingly little, but in a way that is freedom.
That is freedom.
Because you do not have the world upon your shoulders to make those mistakes.
Well, I think another beautiful thing to watch play out, like in this situation I'm in, is your decisions.
My decisions?
Yes, yours specifically. Allow other people to then make decisions. So it's not like passing the baton where like you're shrugging the responsibility of making a decision onto someone else, but like your action can turn into someone else's reaction, and then you have this domino effect.
I had an interesting conversation today, and sometimes it can feel like whenever it's like me, or like I used to get frustrated because I'm an organizer. I make plans and people follow them. I used to be anyway. And I
you sure do make plans.
Well, I used to be that way. The reason I've fallen off though is because it got frustrating. It's like, oh, well, people only ever want to do things with me whenever I do the planning, right? That sucks. It feels like, oh, and obviously it's not that way anymore. But I got frustrated for a time, and I stopped making plans because it felt like, oh, well, maybe people need to demonstrate to me that I have value outside of making those plans. But that's faulty thinking, and it's faulty thinking because two things. First, whenever you're the one that always makes the plans, maybe it's an accident of your own design, but you become the one that always makes the plans, and people just expect that. It's like, it's not that they won't do things with you if you don't make any plans, it's that they won't do things, period, if you don't make the plans. And two, just because you organize, just because you make the plans, just because you're the ones that does that, doesn't necessarily indicate that there is a lack of value or desire to be with you from the people around you. It just communicates that you are the one to instigate it. It doesn't necessarily imply lessness.
You and I are definitely initiators.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm less so than I used to be, by far.
In fact, and I'm more so now, which was really kind of kicked off by experiences I had in my senior year of high school. But yeah, like my parents and I have talked about this a little bit because ever since I asked this girl out and she said, "Oh, maybe give me some time." I've been worried because I'm like, well, she says we can still be friends, but like she doesn't text me unless like I text her first. She doesn't say like, "Hey, do you want to go and hang out?" Which I get that. That would be awkward. Like, if someone's sitting on the fence about going out, like, hang out in person.
Even but I get what you're getting at, though.
I feel like, well, she says we can still be friends, but she's not texting me. And I always text my friends. But then I thought about that. I was like, wait, hold on.
I always text my friends.
I always text my friends, and that's something I do. And oftentimes, like, I'm the one who starts a conversation with someone. I'm the one who invites them to, hang out or have a meal or go to this party or something. I'm just naturally an initiator, and that doesn't say anything like less about them or more about me. It's just a weird role that people have when it's like, some people are just more comfortable taking on the responsibility of making decisions.
And I know people who I might not talk to them for like a year, and like we're still just as good as friends as whenever we left it off. It's because some people, it's like initiators, I'd say, thrive even if they don't always thrive, but they need that interaction, so they seek it. Whereas it's like an initiator, if you're operating on the assumption that everyone is an initiator and that they're just initiating without you, that's not true. Some people just like sit in their little bubble and they're happy. Like that's what they do. I think it's important to remember exactly like you're saying, that people are different.
People are different.
And it's weird because it is something that if you want people to ask you to go do things, then asking them to go do things will hamper that. It'll make it less likely because you develop that habit. But at the same time, it doesn't detract its value at all. And maybe maybe the reason people aren't asking you to do things is not because no one wants to ask you to do things, it's just because you don't have the right people in your life, or that you don't have the people that do that in your life yet.
Yeah, or because I've asked them to do things so often that they expect, oh, well, if Justin wants to hang out with me, he'll ask me first.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to get at. It's just like it's an ingrained habit. It was a very weird experience for me because my closest friends went off to college. At least the closest, obviously closest at the time, both geographically and otherwise. And then I still have plenty of friends here, but whenever a good chunk of a group leaves and everyone else is busy, it can be hard. Like, for example, my freshman year of high school, which was senior year of high school. Sorry, my freshman year of college.
What was my senior year of high school?
You can tell I'm tired.
Yeah.
And everyone's starting college. They're busy. You're a flock leader, and a number of things. You're busy. They're geographically distant. Makes it harder. And it's like, you can look at that as an initiator like I am, and be like, oh, well, shit, I guess I can't do shit now. It's like,
that's how I felt. Like being at Glendale without like this bigger friend group that we're part of, it was kind of hard for me to figure out, well, what do I do now?
yeah. And
so I just kind of started joining lots of clubs, being like, I'll find more people here. And I did. But the interactions with them did feel very different.
I'd say, and this is something, it's easy to look at yourself and your friends and your circle to be like, oh, we're special. I will say something that Elijah has pointed out to me that I think is true, is that I think the people we surround ourselves are both more analytical and maybe just by the feedback loop more emotionally available to talk about shit. Like something he expressed to me is like a lot of the people in his, he knows a lot of like generic manly men, right? And it's like something that blew my mind. It's like manly men don't like talking about their feelings. It's like, I've have so little experience with that type of person nowadays because like I don't really consort with that type of person that it could be hard to grasp. Like, oh, people are still like that.
Yeah.
But they are obviously. It's like, it's interesting. But I do think the group of people we surround ourselves with is pretty unique in that aspect.
Yeah, and Elijah's actually come to me with that too. It's something I really appreciate about our friend group, just because I think it's led to a much faster sort of process of emotional maturity. And I remember at least when we were younger, like 3-4 years ago, that would also kind of lend itself to more emotional outbursts in the friend group. But I think that resolved itself pretty quickly, and I'm very grateful for that, right? Because I've been thinking about like how much I think about like my thoughts and my feelings and the feelings of others now, and I'm like, that's stuff that I talk about a lot, but like I don't hear other people saying they talk about that stuff at all. They just kind of they hang out, they go do things, they do their schoolwork, but they don't generally go on these like they don't have these sorts of conversations. Like the very fact that we're doing this podcast and that like
or that we sat in AD's room doing the question game.
Or the question game, yeah. Or like the fact that we considered, oh yeah, we need to invite our friends to this podcast because they'll enjoy doing it.
Yes,
we surrounded ourselves with that kind of
now,
person.
I'm not going to take sole credit for that, but I am actually going to hand it to somebody else. I think that the beginning of that, like that chain of events, that butterfly flap, was my grandma's interaction with me.
Really?
Right. Uh, she is always, because I've ever since I started high school or like late middle school, I went over there, and we didn't talk about light stuff. We talked about death, and life, and alcoholism, and in my family, we talked about all this sort of shit, and it really kind of changed my mindset to be more analytical, more inward feeling in that way. And then, I started playing D&D. I started getting these sorts of friends, and I'm not going to stop that type of conversation. I'm going to keep doing it. And I meet people who naturally jibe with that sort of feel.
Yeah.
Kind of weird sentence. But because I find people who are not just like, who don't have that or at all, more like people who would work with that, and that's why I like them. And then we have those sorts of conversations. But I wouldn't be finding those people or looking for those people if my grandma hadn't done that for me. And it's like, I think so many people out there in the world don't have that initial start.
Yeah.
They don't have their grandma who gives them the meditations of Marcus Aurelius to read.
See,
right? They don't have that in their life.
For me, it sort of started with my parents, because they made it clear that like I should be emotionally available with them, but I still didn't see my friends as people I could be like that with, up until those nights that we would have, just talking about stuff and playing the question game and talking about this stuff. I'm like, wait, is it okay for us to talk about this? Like, it feels like we're crossing a boundary, but at the same time, it also feels like we're not, and like this is like something safe. And so really, I think it was the last day of my freshman year, your sophomore year, high school.
Oh yeah, I do remember that. Yeah.
That specific
that
sleepover,
rainy day.
That rainy day when we were hydroplaning out of school.
I do remember that. Yeah.
And I remember like we looked outside at the football field and we could just see the curtain of rain going.
Yes, like towards us, drenched from the door to the car.
Yes.
Interesting. It's really interesting the way life works out that way. It's, I have a point to this that relates back to what we're saying. My junior year, I felt like I was top of the world by the time spring break was rolling around. I was going to Boise State that summer. I was really finding myself, I should say. I was going to be going to the Quiz Bowl Nationals, even as a backup, which is pretty cool. I was get to go with my mom and have that experience. I just found out a girlfriend that I really liked, all this sort of stuff. Was in a production, even if only as cast. I'm like, oh, I really want to experience this high school stuff. It's like, wham, COVID. National pandemic, international pandemic. The world is shut down. And if I didn't have the type of people in my life that I did, I think that would have been way worse for me than it was. Because it was the same for everybody, right? But in the circumstance where, and like, I'm not going to say normal, because obviously I don't know. But I'm going to say in maybe an average group of friends where it's more surface level, it's like I don't think they'd have a deep enough support or a deep enough precedent of emotional support to kind of carry through that.
I think that's something very important. It's like the types of interactions you have with your friends can like deepen their ability to support you.
Very much so.
Because like we talk about, like anyone can talk about their friend group as a support group, but like very much the dynamic of our friend group, I feel like it can carry a much heavier load.
I will say though, it's interesting the talking about the way we are, because in a way it has weakened because of basic distance, because of an absence of a sole server or a sole nexus of mecca of communication like we used to have, in the absence of a few of these things. But I would argue what's interesting is that the precedent that we have established in those types of conversations it's hard to break a connection that's like deep like that unless you change in a fundamental way. You know what I mean? It's like whenever Genevieve and Elijah come back to Springfield, it's like during the actual school year, I'll be like, oh man, they probably found a way cooler John by now, But then they get back and it's like, oh no, like they've changed. Obviously, I've changed too, but nothing has changed. And I think it's because if you build a bridge sturdy enough, it can withstand something like that.
It withstand the time. I think Elijah said something about that to me when we were having a conversation. It's funny we're bringing up him so much. Shout out to Elijah.
You could probably be watching this and be like, oh my god, they're trying to do homework here. They're saying my name a bunch.
But I think it was him who said this. I think the friend group that we have built and just the way that we've interacted, even in just like the few short years that we've known each other, is definitely something that not necessarily will but can stand the test of time.
It takes effort, which is hard. It's very hard. It's like today, for example, I wake up and I'm still dog tired for some goddamn reason. It's like, I just want to go back to sleep, you know. I try to uphold my commitments, but I have to drop some of them because I have other commitments that pop up. And, suddenly you have strained relationships. You have people who want to see you, but you haven't seen in a while. And I think in this adult life, going back to that earlier conversation, whenever you have those responsibilities, it's really easy to take a friendship, which might withstand some burden, and put it on the back burner to deal with more pressing stuff. And maybe that's the right thing to do, at least in the short term. But I think the reason friendships break is not usually because of some quick drama or some burst of drama, but more of that repeated, okay, I can let that'll be okay if I put that away. You know what I mean? And you do that over the course of years.
Yeah. Like in the short bursts, like you definitely get that impression, like, oh, this person doesn't care about me anymore, or I don't care about them anymore, so we should separate. But simply with time, when you don't have those regular interactions, and you're like, oh, this person doesn't care for me, or I don't care about them, and so it's like, naturally you kind of reach that same point. It's just it's extended because the lack of caring for that person is not shown in some big, quick sequence. The lack of caring is simply shown by time passing and you not feeding that relationship,
and not even thinking about it. It's like. It's easier, for example, for you and me to be friends, and it's easier for Elijah and Genevieve to be friends because we're in the same town and they're in the same town most of the year. It's a simple matter of, you're sitting there and you're bored, and it's like, oh, what do I want to do with my time? I'll go climbing today, or whatever it might be. It's less so than it used to be. It's like I like to think the online, because you could make a very valuable and a very interesting, a very just as valuable friendship online as you can in person, I think, because it's just a matter of whenever you have it's you can have both, but whenever you have a very busy in-person life, it can be hard to maintain virtual relationships and vice versa.
Yeah,
because if both parties are busy in person, how can you maintain that virtually if neither one has time for virtual stuff?
Yeah, like oftentimes, like the people we associate ourselves with, at least initially, are people who we encounter while we are busy in person.
Yeah, like work friends or
school friends,
whatever it is. Yeah,
and something I wanted to add to my early comment about that lack of care kind of leading to friendships separating over time. I think why Elijah is right that we very may well be like on friend terms for life is because up front we've invested so much care in each other. We've had these conversations. We kind of have this knowledge that no matter what happens, we'll care about one another, even if we fall out of each other's everyday conscious space.
It's interesting you say that because I think you're right. It's like it's this concept that okay, this person has seen some dark parts of myself and they're okay, so we can handle some like distance.
Yeah. Right.
And it's because I feel because relationships are very similar. Because I feel the same way about Randy. It's like I'm at a point in my relationship with her. It's different, it's romantic, right? But it really isn't. But I'm at a point in my relationship with her where it's like, man, I think we can put up with some shit. Like if life threw some stuff our way, because I feel like I have truly aired out my demons, and she has seen me at maybe not my worst, but certainly not at my best. And I think that if you develop that kind of emotional openness with a friend, that it can accomplish a very similar effect. It's like you will have 1,000 acquaintances, but one true friend is kind of the notion. You know what I mean? And yeah. I think most people find a true friend because they experience these things not necessarily consciously, like these moments, but like just by happenstance. Like soldiers form these deep friendships because they perform these terrible things together they have to do to stay alive, and any other number of careers, right? It's like, but if you can do it consciously, it's not something that's commonly done to form that bond.
And our whole friend group, I'm so glad that I stayed in Springfield just because I feel like I just have the chance to, to nurture that, that sense of caring for one another more when I'm seeing them in person.
No.
Okay.
What are they even doing? Like, I've heard them stomping around and stuff.
They're
probably
you've had a sleepover in middle school too. It's a wild time.
They're probably going on some interdimensional adventure.
They're going on a spirit quest. You know,
Spirit
like
quest, yeah.
we're talking like 80s coming of age movie spirit quest right now.
Spirit quest, yeah.
They're discovering something about themselves.
They discovered something about themselves. Yeah,
so funny. And they discovered something new about themselves and maybe each other.
Will they be able to follow Atreus, the Egyptian demigod, to the ends of the earth within their psyche?
Will they be able to find the lost gold of Atlantis?
When will they figure out that their great-great-grandfather's time machine was buried beneath their ancestral home?
Stop. Roll it back. Did you just say figure?
Huh?
Did you say figure? Like the word figure out? You said figure. Like figure out.
I think so, yeah.
Oh my, you Missourian, you Midwestern.
Figure out.
It's like, you gotta, I'm not trying to do a Midwestern accent. Oh, you gotta figure that one out, eh?
Figure that one.
That's what you did.
You gonna figure that one out?
I have noticed, to go to a lighter topic, because I do need to express this. I have noticed that whenever I'll be stumbling into people, because it happens, and you'll go, I'm going, oh, I'm sorry. Like, I don't know why I've been saying that. I go, oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Well, I don't know where it came from, man. I start doing it. I do it in that exact voice. I go, oh, sorry. It's hopefully endearing. I can't speak as to whether it is or not.
I don't know when it happened, but I just suddenly started catching myself saying y'all. Like, I didn't say that before.
Okay, y'all's common. Like,
y'all is common.
It's like, ope is common too, but it's like less around here. That's more of like a north. That's like
a Michigan thing.
Yeah, like a Michigan thing.
Dude. The whole thing where like they hold up their hand, like show you what part of the state they live in. It's like, well, what about the people in North Michigan? Who are like on the little like peninsula part.
They go. Whoa.
then like they're trying to start like some kind of kung fu fight.
They're about to cast a ninjutsu. They're about to go. Get shadow clone, you know, up in here. I know Naruto maybe.
Naruto maybe.
I'm so tired. It's just. I don't know why I don't. I think it's just bad habit, but I need to just like go to sleep at the same time every night. I just need to do that.
It is quite nice. Yeah.
It's like, because whenever I say I don't know, I know why it's happening. I know why I have these habits, but it's more like I'll be sitting there. I'm like tired at my computer. I'm like, but like why am I like? But why? Like I know I want to sleep. I'm like, why am I doing this to myself? It's like why?
It was kind of interesting. This is actually going back to our previous conversation. Because we've definitely kind of gone off the rails here on a tangent. Thanks, Kaylee.
I blame the door.
But, I was thinking today about, like, my New Year theme, which is, hard, better, faster, stronger, focusing just more on my not necessarily just my physical health, but also, like, my spiritual health at church and my emotional health with my friends and stuff. And I've noticed that by diverting my care into those things, I care a lot less about other things. Like, I don't think about my game as often. Like, how much money am I getting from that? Because when I was working on it constantly, like, I was just thinking about it so much. And so it took up a bigger slice of my life pie. Life of Pi, huh? But,
good movie. Fantastic. I'm not
a good movie.
But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. Orange juice. Anyway,
sorry. I think it's late and we're getting off topic, but pie life.
Pie life, yes, pie life.
Life, the life
slice.
Pie. Slice. We're back on topic.
So I would care about it so much, so I'd think about it so much. But now, like, that what this year has kind of helped, what I've done for myself this year, is I've made my pie a lot more varied. And so it's weird because it's not like I care about each part of that life less. I've just given myself more to care about. And, and part of that experience of just caring about more stuff is weird. Because now I'm just like, that just fundamentally changes my thought process. And that's what's different. It's not like I care about, say, my game less, but I give less thought to my game because I'm spending time, giving thought to other things. And that's had, I think, a really good impact on me. So far, anyway. Because it just, it prevents me from being able to fester over something and see it as, like, this big, giant thing that's, like, going to affect my life in every way. Because, like, to go back to how I was when I was focused on my game, it's like, my time and energy was spent working on this game, so my focus was on it. So I cared about, like, say, my family. I cared about my personal health just as much as I do now, because the size of the pie is the same, right? So I still care about everything just as much, but the amount of thought I give to everything was very out of balance. And so even though, like, I cared about, like, say, my family and my connection with my parents just as much as I do now, I give my connection with my parents and my other friends more thought, and so I feel more comfortable with that. And like, if a problem comes up with any one area of my life, it gets kind of the impact that problem has on my psyche is diminished, not because I care about the problem less, but because I see that I have so much more to care about in light of that problem. And that's what kind of it has been having such a tremendous impact on me. It's like having this perspective that's given to you just by having a lot more to think about, stops you from festering over the little things that come up. But like with my game, like anytime like I got like a one negative review on Steam, that's all I could think about for a week. And now if one comes up, I'm like, they're kind of right. Like, I want to go hang out with my friends now, or go rock climbing.
It's a matter of sunken cost.
Yeah.
I think I will cut it off soon because I'm feeling it. I am. Yeah. But I do want to quote.
We just passed an hour, so yeah.
Nifty, very nifty.
Very nifty.
I think it's very insightful that you say that. It's like, in a day, I'm often. Let me rephrase. I'm often like beset by this thought. It's like, if I start doing this 30 minutes every day, then that will build a dynasty in a year, or it'll build over a given period of time. But investing that time in the day, whenever you focus on life day to day, can be a lot. It's like, why should I invest doing this whenever I could be doing this, sort of thing. I think whenever you diversify your interests, you diversify your time, you diversify your thought, it means that some certain things can fail and affect less of your sunken cost.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
I think that I'm trying to think of something insightful to say here to add, but like, honestly, I disagree with you. I think it's a very good way of looking at life. I will say the Buddhists in general balances everything. It's not a matter of perfecting any one thing, but a matter of like making that scale of life end up just right. I think what's interesting that in the society that we have of not proficiency but productivity, you have this notion that you should choose one thing, stick to your lane, and be really freaking good at that. But I think a lot of people don't remember that the full saying is not jack of all trades, master of none. Is a jack of all trades, master of none is oftentimes better than the master of one, because more often than not, having your toes dipped into a large number of variety of things is going to serve you better and serve the people around you better than being the master of one individual thing.
Like to go back to that pie example, like say 80% of my thought is given to work, right? If something goes wrong at work, then 80% of my 80%
you're
of
just
my
talking about our parents' generation.
Then 80% of my psyche is now troubled. But then, like, if I've got 10% focus on work and then 10% here, 10% there on all these other things, if something goes wrong at work, well, that's only 10% of my psyche that's taking a hit, right? And so definitely sunken costs. It's
not necessarily psyche, but time. It's a matter of time, because as a resource, time is literally the one thing. It is the basis that all other resources and all other currencies are based upon.
That's true.
Because the one thing you cannot get back or trade freely, right? Whenever you go to work, for example, you are exchanging money for time. Whenever you go to school, you're exchanging time for knowledge. It's just a matter of exchanging that. So whenever you invest something, you expect a return. And if the return is not what you were expecting, like, I'm viewing this in terms of economics, right?
Yeah.
It's like, you don't ever just take all your money and invest it in one stock.
You don't, yeah.
Even if it's a really stable one. It's like, you wouldn't even do that for U.S. Treasury bonds. I'm looking at that bank that recently failed. Right? You wouldn't do that because, what the fuck if it fails? It's everything. You diversify. You put a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there. Maybe the return won't be as great as if one of those stocks took a big raise, but also won't be as bad as one of them goes under. I think that this focus on productivity in our culture, though, really de-emphasizes that. And it's also, I think people, because money, sure you've heard the term money is religion, and I think people look at money and they think that is time. I think there's been this weird kind
Yeah,
of.
there
You
has
kind of
been.
get what I'm saying? Where
No,
it's like there's
exactly. Yeah.
money has almost, after a sense, been placed above time and the importance of resources. And I think what's really interesting is that our generation is taking that. They're like, no, time is more important. I want my time. I need money, but I want my time. And there's this fundamental dissonance between people above us and us. And I think in your circumstance, it's rather interesting because you made quite a lot of money off your game.
Quite a lot.
And I think many people about, like, I've told people about what you've done with your game, how much money you've made, and then they're super. What? Oh, dinner's done.
Dinner's done.
Good timing. I think a lot of people look at what you did with your game, they're like, that's amazing. Why isn't he still working on that? But you came to the realization on your own that by many classical definitions of success, you were being successful, but that's not necessarily what you wanted from your success, not what you wanted from your time.
Exactly. No, like Tara and I were actually talking about this at dinner just tonight. Working on my game helped me realize that yes, I enjoy doing this, and yes, like I could always look at those other backrooms games that I'm sure made a couple people millionaires, and not me, and I can have agreements about that. I can be like, oh man, I put in more time into my game than they did, more effort, but they got a bigger return, and I could see that as agreements. But to me, like I'm not too troubled about that because I realize like I don't need that game to play such a huge role in my life for me to be happy, for me to be productive. And what I've especially realized now, like this year, is like I can just invest time in building connections with friends at school, friends from high school, maintaining those connections, making sure I'm physically in shape, and making sure that I'm keeping my interests varied. And it's harder to see that as productive because you don't have that linear view of putting time into this will most likely get me bigger returns. So it's harder to see that, but like in the long run, what I'm doing now, I would say is more successful than me working on my game. Because yes, you have that contemporary definition of success where it's like, you put in the hours into this one thing, and then you saw returns because you put in the time. But like I feel like in the long run, I'm going to get much greater returns from what I'm doing now by diversifying because it slowly builds over time.
It's also a matter, it's very fascinating. Time is the one resource you can't get back. And in a very real way, as a youth, as a young person, it's like one of the focuses of this podcast, right? You are being told that now is the time that you invest in your future because there will be a time where you can no longer invest in your future, right? That you just physically have to stop. And I think that this can create this mindset, and it has for many, that you need to put your nose to the grindstone, get to work, and start working, start investing, start doing whatever it is. Work on a game, get fit, do any number of things to be productive now. And I think what people are doing without even realizing it is they're trading their time pie, or their thought pie, their time, fundamentally, now for time later. In a way they may not even realize in the moment. I think I've learned it recently, and I'm once again looking at it through an economic lens. There's something in economics called opportunity cost.
Yes.
The notion that there is nothing that is truly free or optimal because doing one thing will always come at the detriment of not being able to do another thing. And I think that whenever you have that in your toolbox to look at life, it really helps you understand that, like, you know what? Yeah, you made a lot of money and were rather successful, learned a lot from making your game, but there are things that you couldn't do. And you looked at that and you said, you know what? I do those other things.
I'll do those other things.
Because I won't be able to later.
And and that's that's another thing that helps me think about the whole situation where these other people got more out of this. They got a higher return on the same risk essentially. In fact, I technically had a bigger investment because I spent more time on it. And one of the reasons I've learned to just accept that gracefully is like, well, that at least gave me enough to invest my time into other things, because now I'm riding off the passive income of that game, and that should get me through college, and that will let me do it gives me the privilege of not having to work on my game anymore, right? Mm-hmm. So it gives me the privilege of being able to invest my time in other things, which I think is kind of important and almost sad, because yes, you can invest your time in a lot of things, but sometimes the ability to do that is bought with money.
Very much so. Because we can talk all we want about how you should not prioritize money. Time is more important. At the end of the day, if you have enough money, you can buy yourself more time, at least after a fashion.
Yeah.
And there are plenty of people out there who don't know what to do with the time in their hands because they don't have to worry about money. Which is not necessarily inherently bad, but inherently unfair, certainly. Yeah. I know I want to end on, though. I want to remind you.
You want to remind me?
We have a deal. If you ever become a millionaire, you owe me $5.
$5. That's right.
You owe me $5, and $5. That is not. I'm just saying it right now. It's because it's probably going to happen. I want that in cash. I want a big old Abraham Lincoln. Oh my God! By the time that happens, though, inflation's gonna make.
I was about to say it's like inflation.
Oh God!
You
know what? I'm gonna stick to my guns.
Maybe we'll all be millionaires in 10 years.
Don't you dare! Oh my God! Weimar Republic looking ass, dude. Okay.
Have you seen the gas meme with Venezuela's inflation?
I have. It's like the chart of the different inflation over time, and it's like Germany goes and then gas. Yeah, I have. Did you know it's one of the most profitable careers, or one of the most lucrative careers for a Venezuelan right now is to mine, to farm gold and RuneScape?
That is sad, but also cool.
In a way, yes. It's like, oh my God, you're earning money off of a game. It's kind of like EVE Online. Mm-hmm.
I'm fascinated to see what work will be like. I 100 years from now, if we have robots doing a lot of things.
Well, was it Rousseau or was it? I forget. It was theorized that there was some economist or philosopher who was like, work is getting easier. At some point, we'll barely have to do any work to maintain society. Right?
Might be.
Here's the issue, though.
Might be Condorcet. I'm not sure though.
Here's the issue, right? To maintain society, we only need so much work. People probably, I think economists theorize we only need 30 hours of work a week to maintain society if everyone worked 30 hours a week. The issue is, honestly, rich corporations and people aren't satisfied with just society functioning. They want to make bank. Right? Which is not inherently... Okay, here's the issue with the system. The issue with the system is that the system is based around forever growth.
Yes.
It's based around infinite growth.
It's not based off of sustainability.
It's based off of if you buy low and sell high, which fundamentally means that if it doesn't go up, then you're going to lose. And if you lose, the economy shrinks. And the economy shrinks, that's bad. Right? That's why the business cycle. That's why all of this. It's a lot. That'll be a topic for the other one. I'm in an economics class right now, and most of it is just me staring at the textbook like, what the hell is going on? But usually by the end of every test, I'm like, oh my God, I do need to express this. Okay, do you know how the deficit works?
No.
Okay, do you know what a treasury bond is?
I think so. Yes.
So okay, as a private U.S. citizen, you could buy a treasury bond.
Yes.
That is you buying or lending Uncle Sam money, essentially, because you're buying U.S. debt, but you're lending Uncle Sam money. Bonds, from what I understand, I could be somewhat wrong, they do something called maturing. You can't sell a bond till after a certain set period of time.
Yes, actually, I have a treasury bond that my grandpa gifted me when I was born.
Mm-hmm. And once it matures, I believe it ages with inflation or something. It retains its value somehow.
Yes.
So you sell it, right? You sell it. Basically, the government gives you back the money. But the deficit still exists. How is that the case, then? In order to pay back maturing treasury bonds, the government issues more treasury bonds. The government pays back its debt by going deeper into debt.
Oh no. John, I'm scared.
This blew my mind when I learned that. It's literally a forever debt cycle. It's literally what kids are like, could you just borrow and take another loan to pay off that loan? It's literally that. But it's the U.S. government, so no one can say anything about it. Or no one can stop it. In fact, a lot of people benefit from it. It's literally free money for a lot of people. Think about it. So, we do have to end soon. And don't worry about them. They're just being silly.
I'm going to worry about them. I think that they need help finding their grandfather's time machine buried right beneath their ancestral home.
You're right. I think I've gotten too much into the treasury bond thing. Interesting, though. Look it up. It's very fascinating.
I will not look it up. I will let you enthusiastically
inform you next time. Okay.
Like I want you to go full tinfoil hat mode, where you're the aliens guy who's just hey, now,
dude, it's
fucking
crazy. It's crazy the way it works. Okay, I will explain this real quick. So essentially, 1/3 of the U.S. deficit is owned by private people, both corporations and households, like the treasury bond that you own, and it's essentially U.S. debt, 1/3 of it, once it's paid off, once it matures and it's refinanced, goes into the hands of the American people. So, in a weird roundabout way, the deficit is really good for a large number of people generating wealth. That I don't think, because people are like, the deficit's bad, but it's like 1/3 of the country makes money off of the deficit.
So weird.
What if you just take that away? What happens? Right?
So weird, dude. I often wonder, like,
Take an economics class, please. It's really eye opening.
I wonder what's just going to come of our skyrocketing debt, like, as a country. Like, when's it all going to come back to haunt us, and how?
So fundamentally, never, because never as long as the world is still functioning, as long as we're not in nuclear war or something, because the reason the United States is the power it is not because of our military, it's not because of our Navy, it's because we're the financial hub of the world. And part of the reason we're the financial hub of the world is because the U.S. Treasury bond is one of the most stable investments that you can make, because bar the collapse of the U.S. government, you can bet your bottom dollar that you're going to get your investment back. People all over the world, the entire world, has vested interest in the U.S. Treasury bond retaining its value.
That is so fascinating. People outside the U.S. have U.S. Treasury bonds.
Oh, 40% of the debt is owned by foreign people.
That's so fascinating.
It's like, and half of that, 40% or something, is China or something like that.
That is so fascinating.
But remember, 1/3 is owned by private people, and then half the debt is owned by government departments.
Oh.
Like government departments. Like half. So the government owns its own debt.
Man, it feels like that Spider-Man meme where it's like, you owe me something. Well, you owe me something.
It's literally crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
There's a Three Stooges gag that I love.
Oh my god, it's crazy.
Where someone's like,
it blows my mind.
Like, can I borrow $20? Well, sure, but now you owe me that 20 back. Well, like, no, actually, I owe you 10. So now, no, you owe me 10. So now I owe you 10. And then one of the other guys is like, well, you owe me 10. Oh, well, here's your 10. It's like, okay, great. And then the other Stooge is like, well, no, you owe me 10. So here you go, there you go with that. And then so you keep passing this $10 bill around until eventually they're like, oh, well, you've paid off our debt.
So the notion is that debt. So okay, here's a very basic economic principle for you, and then we do have to end.
We do have to
tired
end.
and I have food.
We do have to end. I need time to upload this.
But very very basic economic principle is that debt. Okay, do you know what fractional banking is? Fractional reserve banking.
And that's where we're going to be ending tonight.
Fair enough.